Joe Ceraulo from SportsMap Radio and Bleav in Queens Mets podcast probably would say Juan Soto as a positive, but we'll see what he thinks. Joe, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. And Juan Soto in Queens, that's just got a nice ring to it, man.
How about Aaron Judge in Queens?
I would take that too. I would definitely take that. I would not put it past Steve Cohen. As much as I love our fearless leader in Flushing, I think he's just spiteful enough that if the Yankees let Judge walk or if negotiations take too long, I could see Cohen swiping in and bringing Judge to the best borough in New York City.
All right. So now let's get to the current team, which has done really well. They get DeGrom back. Now the 1-2 punch of Scherzer and DeGrom. How important moving forward for the Mets, especially when they get to a short series, do you think that's going to be?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you said especially when they get to a short series. This team is built for so much postseason success. I mean, if you look at 2015, 7 years ago, when, of course, they made it to the World Series, fell in 5 to Kansas City, the Mets had the worst record of the 5 National League playoff teams. They had 90 wins. Even the 2 wild card teams had 98 and 97, respectively. But they were built for those short series. They had Harvey, DeGrom, who despite a poor World Series start was lights out through the NLDS and the NLCS. And that's what you need. You need starting pitching to win in the playoffs. And, Scherzer going tonight, DeGrom going tomorrow. I'm not expecting the world from Jake in his first few starts. But, essentially give him 2 months of delayed spring training, and I can't wait to see what happens down the stretch.
Well, in other words, October, he should be in midseason form at that point.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which is interesting. Now let's bring it to what they need to do right now. The Mets are not a perfect team. Like most teams, they have a hole here or there. They were able to get a DH in Vogelbach. Okay. Now what else do they need to fill to get themselves on a better track?
Well, they need a right-handed Vogelbach, essentially. He's a great DH when righties are on the bump. But the Mets all year have struggled immensely against left-handed pitching. And there's a lot of great lefties in the National League that they would have to face come the postseason. Guys like Kershaw, obviously, Urias with the Dodgers, Max Fried down in Atlanta. So the Mets need to shore up their lineup against lefties. Vogelbach can't hit him. They just brought in Tyler Naquin, who, slugs against righties great, but he's another lefty bat, 56 career home runs, and 51 of them are off righties. So the Mets need to go in for a guy like Wilson Contreras, or if the Cubs aren't going to budge on price, a guy like J.D. Martinez, who, obviously actually hits lefties better than Wilson, doesn't provide the defensive versatility that Contreras does. But, J.D. hits lefties better, and I think a deal with Boston would be cheaper than a deal with Chicago. So that's the big move coming up in the next 24 or so hours.
Yet they do need somebody behind the plate.
They do. They definitely do. And, that's why there's also been rumors of a deal with Boston, not only bringing J.D. to New York, but also bringing Christian Vasquez, their incredible catcher, who's going to walk here over as well. The Mets right now, McCann is due to return from the IL on Thursday. The Mets have 2 defensive studs in James McCann and Tomas Nido, but offensively, their production from behind the dish about at the bottom of the MLB. So Contreras would be a great spark because he can obviously start at catcher, every day. And then when lefties are pitching, you can DH him and have Nido and his defensive prowess back there. But Vasquez would be a pretty good second option to Contreras, especially if he comes cheaper.
The Braves don't have Freddie Freeman any longer. We know they're the defending world champions. But what has made them a tough out when you have watched them?
I mean, for me, the Braves pitching is really what's carrying them more so this year than even their lineup. Ozzie Albies has been hurt for a while, and even when he was healthy, he really was not having a good season. Acuna hasn't had an Acuna-like season. I mean, he's been good since his return, but, a guy like him you expect to be phenomenal, not just good. For Atlanta, it's been all about their pitching this year. Max Fried, I just mentioned him. Yep. He's sensational. He's a Cy Young candidate. But then you get a kid like Spencer Strider, who started the year in the bullpen, had to move to the rotation, and, he's been absolutely lights out. He's come back down to earth a little bit over his last 3 or 4 starts, but he's still got a K rate that, if he qualified, I Bleav he'd be atop the National League in Ks per nine if he had the innings to do so. Charlie Morton has put together some really good starts. Ian Anderson's been better lately, slow start to the year. And, we haven't even mentioned when Mike Soroka comes back.
Yeah.
This Braves rotation, we talk about the Mets being built for October. There's a lot of good pitching in the National League. The Mets, Braves, and Dodgers, they all have lineups that can mash, but more importantly, they all have great starting pitching.
The Phillies had a great run after Robbie Thompson was named the manager and got themselves back into it, then slumped again, and then it had the perfect elixir 4 games with the Pirates. It's amazing how that puts you back on track every time. How do you view the Phillies, even though they're 9.5 back right now?
Yeah, I don't view them as a threat to the Mets right now, and that's not only because they're 9.5 back, but it's because the Mets have really had their number this year and just dominated them head to head. But I view the Phillies as a legit playoff team. I think that they're gunning for that newly added 6th seed in the National League, and it's going to be interesting because right now when you look at a team like the St. Louis Cardinals, for example, and they're talking about maybe adding Soto. I know that they were looking at Ohtani, even though it just came out that per John Heyman's report, the Angels aren't going to move Ohtani. But, the Cardinals are gunning for that 6th spot, and they're talking about going all in. I think the Phillies right now are in a better position for it than the Cardinals. And the National League East is just such a great division. I do Bleav you're going to have 3 playoff teams come out of it.
Right. From the Mets' point of view, who would the Mets be concerned about in terms of somebody that moves to another team? Who would they be worried about in that vein?
Well, the obvious answer is Soto going to the Dodgers. It's been reported that there's 3 finalists in on him, and it's St. Louis and San Diego, who I think have a better chance because of, I think that they have more depth and more MLB players that they'd be willing to part with than the Dodgers. But, the Dodgers kind of lurking in that 3 spot for him. If they get Soto, I'm scared. But at the moment, the only team in the entire MLB, and maybe, as a Mets fan, we haven't won a World Series since 1986. So maybe it's a little cocky of me to say this, but the only team across either league that scares me is the Houston Astros. And so I would say what worries me with the Astros at the deadline is that they're heavily in on 2 guys who I'd love the Mets to get, and that's Josh Bell and Wilson Contreras. I've actually been on record saying it for over a month now that when it comes to a bat, Josh Bell has been my most desired guy, but Mike Rizzo seemingly doesn't want to deal with the Mets. So Josh Bell to Houston seems like a sure thing. And, that scares me should both of those teams end up facing each other in late October, early November.
What did you think about the Josh Hader deal from Milwaukee to San Diego?
I love it for the Brewers. I mean, the Brewers have, so many teams get desperate around the deadline and they start looking for bullpen help. The Brewers have an embarrassment of riches at the back end of their bullpen.
Yes, they
and
do.
I don't even think Josh Hader was the best relief pitcher on that team. To me, it's Devin Williams, who, is right up there with Ryan Helsley, as I think you could argue for the 2nd best reliever in the National League behind only Edwin Diaz. Williams, to me, will slot in beautifully in that closer role for Milwaukee. I think Rogers, despite having 28 saves, is going to be more of a lefty specialist / 8th inning guy. And when you look at guys like Dinelson Lamet, who, they also pulled in this return for Hader, don't forget Lamet, I know it was a short season, 60 games. He was 4th in Cy Young voting in 2020. In fact, from 2019 to 2020, the guy averaged 12.5 Ks per 9. So he's got filthy stuff if the Brewers can really channel it. And then they got some good prospects. Robert Gasser, the 7th-ranked prospect in San Diego's farm system. He's a lefty. His last name is Gasser. And the guy throws gas, but he's also got great off-speed stuff. And then you've got Esteury Ruiz, who, if you look at him in terms of his ranking, he's only the 28th prospect in their system. But he's gone from AA to the big leagues this year. And in the minors, hit a combined 333 with 15 home runs. So the Brewers need outfield help. Ruiz can provide immediate outfield help on a team that, not too long ago actually cut Lorenzo Cain. So I think it was a great deal for the Brewers.
The Mets recently took the 2 that they played against the Yankees, which, of course, means you've now seen it up close and personal. How good are the Yankees?
The Yankees are a really good regular season team, but I don't think they're built for postseason success because I think the Yankees desperately need pitching help. They've got a great all-or-nothing lineup. that when you're playing in a bandbox where it's 314 to right and 318 to left, it can win you games against the Kansas City Royals by scores of 11-8. But when things come down to Justin Verlander and Luis Castillo and Alek Manoah, all of a sudden it's going to be tough for the Yankees, because if they're not hitting home runs, they're not scoring runs. And we saw that, against the Mets. They scored 5 runs in that series, and 4 of them were due to the long ball.
52% of the Yankees' runs this year have been from home runs.
Yeah, that's a great number. I didn't have that number on me. So that just further validates the point that if the Yanks aren't hitting the ball out of the park, they're not scoring runs, and they just don't have the pitching to be winning games 2-1, 3-2. It's why I said the Astros scare me so much, because if I'm a Mets fan and the Mets hold the Yankees to 3 runs, I'm walking away going, oh, the Mets probably won that game. Mm-hmm. If I hear that the Mets held the Astros to 3 runs, I'm thinking, well, did they hold us to 2? The Yankees don't have the pitching to really scare me in October, but hey, that lineup, it's definitely a good one.
Yeah, no, obviously it's an excellent lineup. Even though they made such a horrible move by getting rid of Joey Gallo, I'm just kidding. Benintendi really, I think, will help them a lot along the way. On the Mets this year, who surprised you?
Ooh, I mean, Taijuan Walker has to be the guy, right? It's like he has been the model of consistency for this team. When Max Scherzer went down on the IL for 6 weeks, Jacob deGrom obviously was originally supposed to come back in June, and now it's August 2nd. He'll be making his season debut. Taijuan Walker really kept things steady. They brought in Chris Bassett, and everyone instantly, oh, Chris Bassett's our number 3 guy. He was an American League All-Star. He's been up and down. He started hot like a bat out of hell, and he's struggled lately. So Taijuan Walker, for him to turn in the year that he's turned in thus far, I mean, an incredible first half, ERA of 2.5. And what I always like to point out to people is that Walker came off the IL early in the season and got shelled in Philadelphia, his first start back. If you take that one start away, his return from the injured list, he turned out a first half ERA of 2.05, even way more impressive than the 2.5 ERA he had. So he was sensational the entire first half, and now he's our number 3 guy moving forward. It's like, without Walker, I don't know where this team would be in terms of pitching, but, there's so many guys that have surprised you. Like Cookie Carrasco just got his 100th win, I believe becoming the 6th Venezuelan-born pitcher to do so. Mm-hmm. And, him being 11-4 with an ERA around 3.5, that's way more than you could have asked for to this point. Everyone has stepped up. This team really just has that next man up mentality, and it's been a beautiful thing to watch.
How much more relaxed has Francisco Lindor been this year?
So much more. But we've seen this, with guys who struggle their first year in New York. Look at Beltran in 2005. Yep. People were like, what? We just handed him a record-setting contract? And then 2006, he ties the franchise record, or at the time he tied it before Alonso shattered it, with 41 homers in 2006. Diaz had that horrendous 2019. Now it's not even close. He's the best reliever in baseball. So Lindor got his New York jitters out of the way. And if you look what he did last year, from June on, he was a top 3 offensive shortstop. It was really just a horrendous first 2 to 3 months last year. Obviously he got back on track late in the season, had that 3 home run game where him and Stanton were going at it on Sunday Night Baseball in the Subway Series. And that's rolled over into this year. The guy didn't make the All-Star team this year. That's just how deep the National League is at shortstop. Swanson and Turner are both having otherworldly seasons, but Frankie Lindor's got 70 runs batted in. The 260 average is a little light, but batting averages are light all around baseball, so I'm not too worried about that. He's been sensational this year.
And then there's Edwin Diaz. Everybody, I think, aches to have a closer like this. I mean, he's got 23 saves. He's got 26 hits he's given up in 41 2/3. I mean, he's just been cooking along at 18 strikeouts per 9 innings. Your thoughts on watching Diaz, and how confident is Citi Field when he takes the mound?
Man, when those trumpets start playing at Citi Field, game's over. The Mets are, 52-0 when they lead after the 8th inning?
Yep.
I mean, it's been unreal. And you mentioned the Yankees scoring 52% of their runs on the long ball. I think Diaz has struck out 52 or 53% of the batters he's faced this season.
Yep.
He's doing what Chapman did when he first burst onto the scene in terms of strikeout numbers. He's absolutely sensational. The Mets have had some great seasons from closers. They've had some great closers, going back to Johnny Franco, a few years of Billy Wagner. Julius Familia had career years with the Mets. There's never been a guy, maybe Wagner in '06, but outside of that, there's never been a year where I've been so confident in the ninth inning that we've got the game. Even when Familia had 50 saves, a lot of them were shaky. A lot of them, resulted on a guy getting into scoring position at some point. With Diaz, it's like you could really turn the TV off in the ninth inning, and that's just such a rarity in baseball.
There is nothing like having a no-drama closer. I mean,
it's so rare, man. It's amazing.
Hey, Mariano Rivera, there's nothing like having a no-drama closer. You're like sitting, oh, good. It is so good to see him out there. Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for being with us today. Appreciate your insight.
Yeah, thanks.